Hey there. So before we jump into this last episode of Season 5, I wanted to take a second and ask you for a very quick, very small favor. We try not to ask you for too much with this show. It's about the conversations and hopefully the community that we are building around some really interesting ideas and some really great records. But it does take a lot of time, and there is a lot of work that goes into it behind the scenes on the part of Tom, on the part of our brilliant editors. And so for that reason, here's all I'll ask. Just take a second, if you don't already, and go ahead and follow the show on whatever platform you use to listen to it. If you still have a little bit of time and you're still feeling generous, you can leave us a review on that same platform. We want it to be honest. If you feel like writing a detailed comment or review, that's cool. We hope that it's a good one. It helps the algorithm push it to the top and push it out to other people that might get a lot out of this show. And at the end of the day, that's all it's about. That's all we are hopefully trying to do, is put something meaningful into the universe. There is a lot more in the works, though. We are deep in the weeds putting together Season 6 for you. So head over to therecordprocess.com where you can sign up for our mailing list. You can drop us a comment, whatever you need to do, and we'll catch you soon.
I learned a lot about just kind of being able to quickly knock out harmonies, because he didn't have a lot of patience for it. So I would have to be like, all right, let's do one more. I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the fourth, or, let's do one more. I want to have a note in between this one and this one. Just having to like think on the fly, like as a singer, and kind of like quickly write a lot of harmonies just in real time. So all the vocal layers were done that way, just like, all right, roll it again, I got another layer, roll it again. And so we were just doing real short loops, and I was just kind of like improvising harmonies, just seeing what worked. And so that's how the vocal layers kind of came together.
Hey there, welcome to the final episode of Season 5, and we close out this season in a similar fashion to how it began, by traveling back in time to celebrate an album that was released over 20 years ago. For this interview, we invited singer and songwriter Aaron Marsh of the band Copeland to jump back in time with us and unpack the making of their 2003 full-length album, Beneath Medicine Tree. We start out talking about how Copeland was formed and the scene that it was born out of. And then we get into ideas about having patience as a songwriter and what that's been like for Aaron over the years. We get into the larger conversation of the band's journey that led them to working with producer Matt Goldman, and how Aaron ultimately chooses to see the creative friction he experienced early in his career as an important part of his growth as a songwriter. We talk about where the lyrics for this album came from, Aaron's process of getting into a flow state while writing, and the fast-paced workflow that was responsible for the impressive vocal arrangements heard on this record. So buckle up, because the Season 5 finale starts right now. The task of making a great album is rarely a solo endeavor, and companies like Audio Movers help empower musicians and creators by streamlining their workflow together and enabling them to make more efficient and informed creative choices. Famous for their groundbreaking collaborative plugin tool, Listen To, Audio Movers have made it possible to stream audio files in real time directly from your DAW to anyone, anywhere in the world. And recently, Audio Movers have expanded their dynamic plugin suite with Inject, an impressive audio routing solution that allows users to route audio in and out of any channel in your DAW. And alongside Inject stands the newly updated Omnibus 2.0, a software application that turns your Mac into a virtual patch bay, making it possible to route audio between applications and hardware seamlessly. And you can get 25% off Inject and Omnibus right now by heading to audiomovers.com and entering the code RECORDPRO at checkout. With over 1 million plus artists already relying on DistroKid to get their music into Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming platforms, you may have heard of it before. But if you're not yet familiar with just how easy DistroKid makes unlimited uploads and retaining 100% of your artist royalties and earnings, now is the time to finally see for yourself. And that's because they've just supercharged the functionality of their platform with the recent release of their new iOS app. The app allows you to upload new releases, check your streaming stats from Spotify and Apple, edit release metadata, and you can even set push notifications that will alert you every time you've earned royalties that you can withdraw right from the app. In addition to getting your music uploaded to DSPs faster than any competitor, DistroKid also has a ton of great promotional tools that can help you market your music better. You can view and share hyperfollow links and allow fans to pre-save your songs in advance, get the credits and lyrics for your songs instantly uploaded, and you can do all this for just $22.99 a year. So head to the App Store and download the DistroKid app for free now. Aaron Marsh, welcome to the record process. We really appreciate you being here, dude. Honestly, this is going to be a real treat for us.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
Yeah, we're very excited too. It is no surprise, obviously, everybody diving in or listening to this will have probably already seen, based on the title, that we have asked you here to get in and dive deep on the making of an incredible album that just turned 20, called Beneath Medicine Tree, that was put out by your band, Copeland. And we were looking forward to having you share some of that time, place, and the process that went into making this thing. It sounds great, and I think there's a reason why it's been celebrated, and still being celebrated 2 decades later.
Thank you.
And I'd love to start, and kind of going back to the beginning, as they say, but even before the making of this album, talk about that kind of time leading up to it, the previous material from the band and where the concept, I guess, maybe of Copeland or whatever was taking shape, leading up to the making of this record.
Yeah. So our band started in Lakeland, Florida. We kind of came up in the scene around here there was a lot of the kind of fast pop punk, kind of like Lagwagon, kind of breakneck speed pop punk. That was pretty popular around here. And we loved that stuff. And then the kind of Hum, Sunny Day Real Estate influenced bands, the kind of Mineral, that kind of the slow, kind of driving, kind of early emo sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love that around here. And so I think, and then of course we loved the kind of just modern pop rock kind of thing, Gin Blossoms, Counting Crows. So I think it was kind of those three, kind of big influences when we started writing Beneath Medicine Tree. Those were the three things we were kind of living in at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, that's not a bad canon of influences. And now I'm starting to already understand why it turned out so well for you. That's great. I mean, yeah, some of those are definitely some pretty iconic names from a lot of the different sides of that, what was happening down there in that time and place, that early 2000s turn, right? The Warped Tour era was big. Yeah,
totally. There's a lot of good music in Florida. There's a band called Dennis and Marsh, was from my hometown, that was they were kind of the big dogs in Lakeland, and their drummer ended up joining Copeland for the second record. And then, Further Seems Forever was down here. A band called My Hotelier from this area that was killing it. Of course, Under Oath, Anne Berlin, all the ones that, everyone came to love from that era.
Yeah.
There's just a lot happening here. It's a pretty exciting time to be in a band in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you mentioned that too, and that you kind of started there, because it really was a heyday. I mean, especially, and a lot of bands that have stuck around, have put out records that, created a whole wave, or even some, kind of subgenres, and started being the flag bearers in that regard. But I think I feel very lucky, myself and Tom, we grew up in Philly, and Philly has had its own really incredible music scene that
amazing
we were lucky enough to be a part of. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really interesting that time, especially, you saw a lot of bands that were products of like, the better the scene, the better the bands that were coming out of it. Right. Or, it was no surprise if you really did your research, or the people that knew, whatever, they were like, oh, well, that makes sense because there's all of these bands, so it almost feels like that bar can, kind of gets raised a little bit, because you're surrounded by such a wealth of exciting stuff happening all at the same time. Interestingly enough, right? So I guess that there's a little bit of that, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of the early days of like internet music, and mp3.com was big in those early days. Something that you said when you're just talking made me think like, like the better the scene, the better the bands. It always seemed like in our town, when there were venues for the bands to play, all the bands got so good.
Mm.
And then like inevitably the venues would get shut down. They'd run out of money, or the city would shut them down or whatever. And all the bands would just fall apart. They wouldn't practice. They, would fight over girls and break up and talk shit about each other. And then like the whole scene would be crap. And then a venue would come along and all of a sudden the bands would get good again. I think it's pretty important for like young bands to have something to like work towards, whether it's a venue or, when we went off the road, I built a recording studio in my town because I thought, like if we have a cool studio in town, the bands will get better because they'll want to make better records, and they'll all be trying to one up each other, and it'll just make better music for everyone.
Yeah.
Cultivating the scene through teeth cutting is amazing. And often yields some fantastic results. But out of the scene, where were the songs coming from before this record? Were you chopping them out in the scene, like live before coming in?
It's interesting. This record did have like quite a bit of songs that were just concepts, like little demos. And then there were a bunch that we had played out a lot, a bunch that we had done like real demos of, like Coffee, which ended up kind of becoming the biggest song on the record. That was not one that we ever played live. It was literally just, I had a demo that I made on my mom's piano. And then Brian and I had made like a little just Fruity Loops drums with like MIDI keys demo. And that one had never been played out. But I mean, quite a few of them had. And, I had bands before Copeland, and, I'd been writing music since high school, early days of high school, even middle school. So I had so much to pull from. So when we went to make this record, everyone was like, all right, well, let's just go back through everything that is available, everything that hasn't been on a record or hasn't really been heard, even things that had been heard, and just like, what's the best stuff we can get from the last like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we did. And it's funny looking back on it now, I think about songs that we didn't put on there that we ended up using later. I'm like, why didn't we even consider that? There's a song on the next record called You Have My Attention that has also become, like kind of a long lasting song. And that one was definitely written before Beneath Medicine Tree. I don't know why we didn't use it. I think at the time we just felt like we had the one set, and those were the ones we were excited about. And I don't know why we didn't use it. I mean, we liked it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great song, and that's really interesting. I also read somewhere, and correct me if this is wrong, but originally a song that was destined, or I guess written or conceptualized as the Beneath Medicine Tree title track, actually was rewritten, right? That and then for people that aren't aware, became a really incredible song on the next record, on In Motion as well, right? So how did that happen? And I mean, because that's, if you have a song that everybody say, that is pretty much comes into fruition and is even spoken of as a title track for an album, for that to not, make the cut. That's an interesting one. So maybe what do you remember about that decision, or that process, how that kind of came to be as well?
Yeah, I think the chorus, I was never happy enough with the chorus the way it was. I wasn't able to get it there before it was recording time.
Okay.
So it got cut, but we liked we already kind of loved the album title, and we had ideas for the artwork. And so we weren't really going to like leave the album title behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, that song, that was Love is a Fast Song was what it ended up becoming. And on YouTube, there's a video of us playing the original version with the original chorus. And, it's not a memorable chorus. And I'm glad we waited. Because what it became later was definitely better than what it was. So
was really, a really powerful anthemic song. I'm not sure I want to go listen to the. I'm going to have to, out of sheer morbid curiosity, now that you yourself have put it out there. But yeah, that is really interesting. So the title stuck around for the album Beneath Medicine Tree, but that song, you sat on it, and I guess sometimes patience, especially as a songwriter, is a virtue.
That's a maturity thing, which I don't think I had at the time, but I did in this case. Is like self-editing and being able to like zoom out and say, okay, this is how I think the song goes. This is how it goes in my head, but is it the best it can be to like a new listener? If I was listening with fresh ears, if this is my first time hearing the song, is this as good as it can be?
And that's interesting too, that you kind of mentioned the way where you started, to collect the building blocks of what would become Medicine Tree, right? Was, some ideas that you had lying around a little bit too. So there's already, it can be really tough, even if it's just an idea and it's not fully fleshed out yet, or if it's a full demo, it can be tough to approach that, with a fresh ear and objectivity, especially for, trying to make sure it finds its place on a record, which is really interesting too, because the record itself comes off really cohesive, and that's not always the case. When we talk about albums, it does feel like there's an intention between all of the songs there. And I think that's maybe some of the, what you're kind of getting at, and probably felt like, and I think every band feels like this, they maybe get better at that editing thing that you talk about as they go on. But that's interesting because it feels like it was really done really well. Do you remember how, when you sat down and took stock of what you all had there going into starting to finish, and at what point did you know that you were writing a full length, and that that was the goal, right?
Yeah, we knew we were writing a record. It was like the traditional thing of you get a record deal and like, okay, here we're going to go do the thing, make the first album. So we felt like we were making a record. It wasn't like it was just a collection of songs and we slapped them together and put it out.
Well, because you'd signed a Militia group, right? So how did that, maybe I guess we should back up real quick. How did that come about too? Because that's part of this, this story as well in a way, because that's sometimes for a band, that sets the pace, that sets the direction, that sets the aim and timeline and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So we had done an EP for a label called Theory 8 Records. They're out of Nashville. They had found us on mp3.com. And so we did an EP with them, and he had sent our record to the Militia group just kind of on our behalf. And Chad Pearson at the Militia group heard it. And I think he said we were the only band that he'd ever signed without hearing them live. He just, straight away offered us a deal.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was in a little bit of a transitional time when we signed the deal. My musical mentor, his name is Brian McSweeney. He was in a band I really liked in high school. They were like a Christian band, but they were like a ripping, kind of like post rock. They kind of had some like Pavement influences and like everything from like Pavement to the Posies. They were like really good, like alt rock band. And he just has Brian has this just incredible, sweet voice. And it's like kind of something I've in my early days, like when I was finding my own voice, kind of took a lot of inspiration from him. His band at the time, Matthew, their bass player quit, and he offered me a job playing bass for his band. So I had essentially who was my musical hero was offering me a place in his band. And then I also had a record deal on the table for my band that I could either take and I couldn't do both. Like Militia said, if you take the gig with Matthew, we love them, that'll be great, but the record deal's off the table. So it was kind of like I'm glad I bet on myself at the time, because it went well.
Clearly.
I would say so.
I always kind of wonder what could have been, if I'd been able to play bass in like my mentor's band.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's quite a fork in the road if you're putting it like that. Cause I think a lot of, I mean, even doing this show, Tom and I, we end up stumbling across a lot of conversations, and we're firm believers in the idea of like having people, you know, creatively to look up to that inspire you, and the idea of mentorship, not just in like a formal teaching role, but in like in that same thing where it's, you know, we talk about the like elder scene members or whatever it have been, where it's just like I grew up thinking your band was the coolest, and I didn't realize that you maybe hated yourself and thought all your stuff didn't matter, but you were a god, right? You know, it's like sometimes some of those scenarios, and people that kind of push you as an artist at that time coming up and make you have those thoughts and put forth, you know, and challenge what you think is possible.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, man. I had no idea. And yeah, that's an interesting one too. So you chose to, I guess, in effect, bet on yourself, you know, like in the songs that you knew you had, but you could have just as easily probably have had a lot of fulfillment and enjoyment in the alternate ride, right?
Sure. Yeah, I often wonder, because he still makes music. He just released a record. His band's called Mirrors with, well, I guess there's 3 R's.
2 I's, 2 R's, an O, and then one more R.
Wait, did you find him?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, actually, it looks very interesting. I'm excited to take a listen. Yeah.
Oh, his voice is so sick. So if you listen to that record they just released, there's a track called Gunshot Glitter, which is a Jeff Buckley track. It's a Jeff Buckley song, and essentially it's a song on sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk. Is like a demo. And they tried to envision what Jeff would have recorded the song had he been able to do like the final version.
Oh, wow.
And they actually got Jeff Buckley's drummer to play on the song. So it's pretty cool.
Oh shit.
Oh, no way. Wow. Yeah. We'll link to that, Tom. I'll send this to you later. I'm glad I found this. This is cool. We'll include this in there for sure.
Yeah. He's a badass. And he was incredibly kind to me when I was like 15, 16. There's a point where I was at one of their shows. I was working as like a tech, like a stage tech, and there was a piano backstage, and he was playing the piano, and I asked him, he's like, "You want to play me a song?" And I played him a song, and it was like a Christmas song that I'd written, and he said, "Go home and record that song. I'm going to send it to Brandon Evil from Tooth and Nail," which at this point, I was 15 years old, so that was huge. He's like, they're doing a Christmas compilation. We'll see if you can put it on. He was just like incredibly kind and supportive, and I wasn't even anything yet. I wasn't good. I wasn't serious, but he was just very, very kind and was just constantly challenging me. And just every time we would go through Chicago, he would come to the show and like give me some listening recommendations or some new demos of his. So it's cool. It's cool to have a person like that to kind of make you feel like you were headed somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Or even just to give you the time of day, you know what I mean? Like that, even that, just that little bit to like, if he had like listened to a Christmas song demo, and even at that point, just like, honestly, this is pretty great, right? Even if it just stopped there, sometimes that's enough for us as creatives to be like, okay, I'll keep plugging away at this. You know what I mean? And I think we all have those stories, or even just someone being like, I never thought that person would be on the side of a stage watching my band at some like festival or whatever. Like, what the hell? Like, I don't, for all I know, they hate it, but they're taking their time, like sitting here. And that's pretty cool. But so, dude, that's amazing. I'm glad you brought that up, because it I think it goes such a long way to informing how I think a lot of great songs, great records, and great careers are often made or broken is with that kind of like support very early on. And that's awesome, dude. Sure.
Probably something that those of us who have had a little success, like it's important to do that for people. And it means a lot, cause sometimes as artists, we can get very just tunnel visioned on our own project, our own vision, all the things that encompasses. And I guess, sometimes it's cool to just be encouraging and helpful to others who aren't there yet.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the scene thing, right? Like just kind of like trying to raise the bar, and even you don't have to be someone's elder to, they can be on same age, same level, same place. And even just taking the time to be like, yo, I listened to your new record. It was awesome. I'm nobody too. I'm doing the same thing, but you should know that I listened to it and respected it. And that to me is, it's still going, still to this day, but that is so paramount to, I think, why you find a lot of periods where a ton of great bands seem to all come up at the same, at the same time. And it's because I think bands are doing that, wherever that's happening. And this is, this kind of person, I'm excited to hear it and get ears on his voice as well. But so that was you mentioned like the Christmas song, he passed that along, and that was kind of a sign.
Yeah, nothing happened with that, but it was more just the sentiment that he did it for me.
Yeah. As music fans, we know that the records we love are more than just something we listen to, right? Over time, they become a part of us and a part of our identity. And nobody knows this better than the people at Rockabilia, the best online shop for band merch, hands down. For more than 30 years, Rockabilia has offered the largest selection of officially licensed music merchandise available around the world. They do it all, from authentic concert t-shirts to band hoodies and posters, and even accessories from your favorite iconic artists. They do hats, backpacks, bags, pins, belts, you name it, they have it, as well as exclusive access to limited edition designs that you can only get through them and the artists that they partner with. Maybe you missed the merch table at a recent show and you're looking to treat yourself. Maybe you're looking to treat somebody else in your life with a gift card. Or maybe you're looking to outfit the children in your life with some new gear, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Yes, they even have accessories for your pets. They have it all, so just head over to rockabilia.com or follow the link in our show notes, and for a limited time, all Record Process listeners can receive 10% off their order just by entering the code ROCKRECORD. That's all one word, ROCKRECORD, at checkout. So we are extremely proud to have the people at Oxford Pennant as an official sponsor of the Record Process again here on Season 5. And I'm here to tell you about their new pennant and flag customizer. It's real simple. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com to make your own custom flag on demand. Simply type in your favorite phrase, inside joke, lyric, whatever you want, approve the preview, and Oxford will print, sew, and ship your flag straight to you from their beautiful headquarters in sunny Buffalo, New York. Creating and ordering your own custom flags from Oxford Pennant is actually so easy and affordable now that I'm concerned I'll have to start paying off my co-host Tom just to prevent him from putting every dumb thing I say this season on a flag. Seriously, I wouldn't put it past him. But with great power comes great responsibility, as we know, and that's exactly what Oxford Pennant is giving you here. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com, search Customizer, and let the designing begin. Had you been showing other people along the way some of these songs once you had signed with Militia and you knew you were getting ready to go into the studio? Was there anybody else that you were kind of bouncing these song ideas off of, or or even just within the band, or how did that process kind of go? Because I think feedback is often really important, especially at that time when you're trying to like collect and refine.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we had our group of friends, of course, from like my college buddies and like the guys in my band before Copeland. Like they were always supportive and encouraging. And I remember at one point, when we were making Beneath Medicine Tree, we went home at some point. And I remember playing, a bunch of like 80% finished versions for one of the guys in my old band. And I just remember this look on his face, like how impressed he was, and how like the FOMO just rolled across his face that he couldn't be involved. He'd moved on and he had like, a career going and all that. But yeah, he definitely, all those folks were so encouraging for us and positive. At that point, I don't really think we had anyone like giving us like constructive criticism. That it takes a very specific person to like say, oh, I think you should do this instead of this. Like I don't think we had that person in our ear at all.
Maybe like a producer.
So Matt Goldman was a producer.
Yes, he took the bait, Tom. Yeah, no, I was. But yes, that is where I think we were kind of heading anyway, diving into this. But I'm curious how that came about. Y'all working with him on the record too.
He had started recording. Let's see, I met him. He was playing drums in a band that played on my college campus, and we were just chatting with him after the show. And he told me, he's like, yeah, if you guys want to come up to Atlanta, I'd love to record you. He's just kind of like, kind of hustling for work. But he told us the band's called Luxury. They were on Tooth and Nail. They did the third Luxury record, which was one of my favorite records at the time when he said that. And I still love that record. And this band called Annie, they had a record called Sci-Fi Canon Blues. He told us he'd done those two records. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so we went up and recorded an EP with them, and then tons of bands started going up to record with them. Dennis and Marsh, My Hotel Year, Anne Berlin, Under Oath. Just everyone was like making the trip up from Central Florida to go record with Goldman. The studios in Florida in that era were all either kind of like metal studios, because there's like a lot of like metal in like Orlando and Tampa and St. Pete. Or it was like boy band, like where we were is like right between Tampa and Orlando. So in Orlando is all like boy band studios. Because when all those boy bands happened, in the mid 90s, but all those studios were still open. Like everybody built a studio in Orlando when they were doing the boy band thing. And so all those studios kind of still existed in the late 90s, early 2000s, but no boy bands were there anymore.
Yeah, very elevated, plush, and empty studios.
Plush. There's actually a studio called Plush.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, it's funny as I said that, I think it did ring familiar. But that's funny, and that's an interesting dichotomy too. That you're just like, but there was nobody that was filling. I mean, I'm sure their way around, but there was no like marquee, like everybody's going here for like these rock records that are kind of in this middle ground world, exactly. Right? So it was pretty polarizing. Yeah, pretty much as soon as we discovered Goldman, like everyone started going up there.
And like kind of like again, like harkening back to like the scene within the space, like I'm sure everyone heard y'all's record and then we're like, oh shit, hell yeah, we got to do it better. Like, listen, I will stand here and attest that, yes, we at least did get on a call with Matt many, many years ago. And I think he had us pegged and thought that, because at that point, this was like post Under Oath and Berlin, those records that he had done. And we were like, nah, you did that Copeland record. That was great. We love, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever. So
what was his response when you said that? Out of curiosity.
I can't go into that. I'm pretty sure he had us maybe incorrectly pegged, but he was probably getting a lot of phone calls at that time from other bands. And so needless to say, we did not make the trip down to Atlanta that time around, but it was interesting because that's kind of how it happens, right? Because one band comes out of there and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, person's got a hot hand.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we got to go. So it really can happen that way. And that's how producers' careers can get broken like overnight with one record that just shoots to the moon.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it's like the band was just that good, but yeah, it's true. But then better bands start going to a better producer and it's that feedback loop, So yeah.
Yeah. So, Goldman's strengths were like drum sounds. I mean, he's the best drummer I've ever met. He's an incredible drummer, an amazing drum engineer. There was one point where I was at the studio and there was an Under Oath record that he'd engineered and it was being mixed, and the mixer called him and was super upset. He's like, I can't get the sound of the drums out of the overhead. And Goldman's like, yeah. The mics were over the kit. Like, I don't want you to get. So essentially, what the mixer was trying to do was trying to replace all the drum sounds and only use the cymbals.
Right.
And that's not how he records his drums. He records like real drums that sound real and sound like a player.
Yeah.
When you do that and you're not like catering to someone who's just looking to immediately replace the drum sounds, I'm sure that's frustrating for the mixer, but
it's a philosophy too. And I think that's also part of what I love about the records that y'all make, and specifically this one, is it has a realness to it, right? But not to be confused with like people will be like, oh, it's raw versus polish, right? There's that whole,
Sure.
Like kind of rock like mix vocabulary, but I think, and it sounds like for him, it's more an idea of you're treating the whole drum set and the player that is sitting behind it as an instrument, and you are capturing that instrument, and less a segmented kind of thing that you're trying to piecemeal together, and you get an energy. There's an innate energy out of that when you really are capturing someone behind the kit. And yeah, if, that's why I think a lot of drummers do end up making really great engineers and or drum engineers, because they kind of inherently, I think, get that because they're used to viewing the whole kit as this one kind of performative instrument and experience. So I don't know, maybe there's something to that, but clearly you mentioned that Matt was a great drummer. So, and kind of looked at it that way.
Totally. Yeah. Amazing drummer. He also, surprisingly, he is not a singer, but he had so many great, just like vocal recording tricks. Little things where like if I couldn't quite get up to the pitch on a high note, he'd say, all right, when you get to that note, raise your eyebrows a little bit. And raising our eyebrows for some weird reason, and this actually becomes a bad habit because then I start raising my eyebrows all the time when I feel like I'm under pitch. But yeah, sometimes raising your eyebrows will just do enough to like lift the muscles in your face, and somehow it gets your pitch up just a tiny bit. And
that stuff is gold for a singer at that point in your career when you're really, these are not, true. And people should know you make it sound easier than I think a lot of these songs are to sing and sing well. Right. So things like that in a studio are super helpful and are kind of this insane light bulb when it comes to like things that and I love this too, because it sounds like Matt and even guys like that we've worked with in our career as well. They're like those kind of old school guys that like the things that they do don't just make the record better or the performance better. They just make your band better and you a better player, as a better performer. And that's, dude, what a perfect example that is. I love that so much. Were there any other like weird moments that you might remember when it came to the vocal tracking or, throughout the process that you're like, huh, really?
there are all kinds of things. I was heavy into layering vocals, which I don't know if he had really like had a singer that wanted to layer quite as much as I wanted to layer on that record. I think he did it a little bit begrudgingly because I don't think that was necessarily his taste to have like walls of vocals. I learned a lot about just kind of being able to quickly knock out harmonies because he didn't have a lot of patience for it. So I would have to be like, all right, let's do one more. I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the fourth, or, let's do one more. I want to have a note in between this one and this one. Just having to like think on the fly, like as a singer, and kind of like quickly write a lot of harmonies just in real time.
Yeah.
So all the vocal layers were done that way. Just like, all right, roll it again. I got another layer. Roll it again. And so we were just doing real short loops, and I was just kind of like improvising harmonies, just seeing what worked. And so that's how the vocal layers kind of came together.
Wow. I guess it prevents you from getting in your own head too much or overthinking it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely not overthought, probably over layered. And which was, I mean, when I look back on the record, I do think I did too much, and I should have listened to him, but I mean, whatever. I was feeling my vibe at the time.
Yeah.
Dude, that's right. And honestly, hindsight's going to always be 20/20, right? Like I think if you did it the other way, there might be a part of you who knows. It's like, man,
exactly.
I wish I had pushed for more of those layers. So it doesn't matter. We're sitting here talking about it for a reason. But it is interesting to think about it, now like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say he and I probably butted heads more than I've butted heads with other producers, but I also ended up, we did 3 full-length records and at least 3 EPs and maybe, or 2 EPs and a few more singles with him. So even though like, yeah, we butted heads, but we loved the result. So
yeah.
I mean, it was all for the best, I guess.
That's a thing that I feel like a lot of creatives in general get kind of nervous about, creatively bumping heads with people. But ultimately, I think there is through that creative process of butting heads, of going back and forth by seeing other sides of what the other person like is trying to intend. I think that there's that filtering process that happens, and like invaluable, maybe sometimes not the most fun.
Yeah you don't get growth without discomfort, right? It's kind of like what they say with that. So I think, Tom, I completely agree in that way. In what you're describing, it's like, I don't think, and I hope that that this show, I hope that this is not what comes off from a show like this that we do, but is that I in no way want to completely continue to push down the line, the narrative that like a great record should be a perfect, flawless process and be like utopia. I think it's actually not that way at all. And in this way, like the butting of heads allowed you to continue finding and really reaffirming for yourself what you wanted out of it. You know what I mean? Like, because the things it teaches you, this in this moment, I'm now realizing this is a thing that's worth fighting for
sure.
me. And or in this moment, this is a thing that, you know what, honestly, I don't give a shit. I'm already thinking about this next set of harmonies. Fine. That I'll trust you on that. Well, let's move on. Sure. Right. And it's really interesting in that way, where conflict can actually help breed that distillation over time.
Aaron, was there any point that you can remember that like something along those lines of like a conflict that y'all were having that ended up like Matt's way or like your way, and like a pivotal moment on the record in that capacity?
I was just trying to think of what would have gone Matt's way in any of these conflicts. I mean, this has been 20 years, obviously, right. Over 20 plus years. So as we continued to make records, probably more of those conflicts would go Matt's way. One, because I think I lightened up quite a bit. The older you get, the more records you get, the more you're like, okay, well, I mean, let's not add this, organ or whatever. Is this fucking record? And we'll make another record next year and I'll add it then, like it's like you kind of like loosen up a little bit.
That is really interesting though. And I do agree with you on that. Just as an aside, like that, when it's the first song your band's ever written, it's your whole world. It's your, you know what I mean? It's your whole identity. But on song 100, you're like, this one's not going to make or break the career, so, so it is interesting that you say that, and that, whether it be Matt or anybody else that you worked with, I think there's like, you're willing to extend a little bit more trust outside because you're less concerned about the outcome at that point.
And making more records with Matt, my taste started to align more with his, you spend more time. And not only was he like making our record, but like he was turning us on to music that we didn't know about. He was, so during that record, we essentially lived with him. We made the record. We lived in the studio when we were making the record because we didn't have enough money to have a place to live. And then when we got finished with the record, we still didn't have a place to live. So he let us live in his attic. Just like literally like pull down the ladder and climb up into his attic. And he had some like plywood over the insulation, and his record collection was up there. So like just the entire length of the attic was lined with his like CDs and records. And so we went from living in the studio to living in a record collection. We spent so much time with him and learned so much about his taste. Back in those days, he would go off on tangents. We'd talk about like, oh, I want this tone to sound like kind of nasally. And he'd be like what? And so we'd immediately start pulling up music that had guitar tones that we were describing as nasally, and he would show us music and we would show him music. And so it was not just making a record, but like really like growing as musicians and as music lovers, I think was like huge during that whole time. You know, we made 3 records, more than 3 records with him. So I think our first recording session with him was in, I want to say 2001, early 2001. No, late 2001. And then the last one we did was in 2006. So that was like a long relationship that we were like making music with him. So it was just a huge part of why I listen to music the way I do. Yeah, I learned a lot from him.
That's awesome, dude. I mean, and I think that kind of thing that you're describing, like when, like before the gears turned on, before you're rolling on any recording or tracking, right? Like that back and forth, I think is really where a lot of that evolution comes from, and where you build that trust, you know what I mean? In the trenches of that. It's like, even that's why I think it's interesting. I was just talking with somebody about the book that Rick Rubin just put out. And all of my personal thoughts aside about where that kind of meandered, I think the reason why he's the first to say is like, nah, I'm not an engineer. You know, like that's not my thing or whatever. It's like, and I think that's why, because that is one of the things that he's really great at, is kind of speaking that language and just talking about music that he loves and the way that it, you know what I mean? And digesting and downloading other people's music. And all of the people at this point that he's come in contact with, you know, like that alone is far more extensive than most people's record collections. And so, but you can imagine the stuff that each one of those artists has come in with, and references and music they've showed him over the years. I think that's how you build yourself, not just as a songwriter, but as a producer and as a, you know, as an engineer, as a person, right? As someone, as a human being, you know, living the human condition, as it were, right? So, but that's, so I just wanted to kind of like highlight that real quick, Aaron, because I think that's a really special thing. And you mentioned you made a lot of music that went a lot of places in that like short kind of 5-6 year window. And that's probably, you know, that's a lot of growth and and a prolific period for sure. So it's really interesting, man. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Y'all are cutting with Matt. And I guess I wanted to know, like, when and where did the lyrics come from? Did the lyrics come before the music, or was the lyrical content driving towards the back end, driving that concept of the record forward?
Yeah. So I typically I usually have like a vocal hook, or, you know, like a simple lyrical idea, and then I'll end up inevitably writing an entire song musically, and then I have to kind of jigsaw myself some lyrics to finish it up. I mean, this record, you know, we were pulling from songs from years past, so a lot of them were finished, some of them needed rewrites. I'd gone through some stuff with a girlfriend who was sick and she was in the hospital, and then because this was a long span of time, it also kind of included the entire time that my grandmother had passed away. So I had a song that I had written for her funeral, and some other songs that had like hospital imagery. And so that was kind of why we had this like kind of beneath medicine tree with the hospital artwork, you know, because we just kind of were seeing like a through line and some of the lyrical concepts. And we were kind of able to sequence the songs in a way that kind of took you through the whole process of like kind of feeling kind of lost and hopeless and fearful, to comforting, and to eventually like kind of hopeful. And so that's kind of what the way we, you know, in our, you know, 20-year-old, 21-year-old heads were, you know, kind of taking this like, you know, batch of songs and putting together something that like would feel like a cohesive musical listen, and like an emotional kind of, you know, kind of had some like a little bit of a storytelling vibe to it.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like, you know, to hear you say it in that way, kind of like draws a similar parallel to like an odd like stages of grief kind of thing, because some of them were, you know, in different periods around that. But it's interesting too, because some of I've heard some people say over the years, like musically, there's a lot of like very uplifting, like kind of bright type songwriting on here. But then lyrically, it is, the things that you're talking about are not always that, but it is beautiful and it does flow very well. So it's interesting to hear that the intent was there in terms of trying to make it feel, like that string and pull that thread all the way through.
Yeah, thanks. I think I give credit to like my Counting Crows influence for that. I think I love the way he writes. I love just like the mood. Like if you listen to Recovering the Satellites from front to back,
yeah,
it takes you through so many different emotions, and there's this kind of like push and pull of kind of bright and flowery to like kind of dark and dismal, and sometimes those two emotions kind of run in the same, run in parallel to each other. So I've always loved that. And I mean, that's definitely been a hallmark of our music, all the way through, is kind of having the kind of dark and the light kind of existing in the same spaces.
I guess I just want to clarify, are you still finding that your writing process now reflects kind of the same like lyrical hook and then like jigsawing the lyrics together now, or is it more fluid, or I don't know, there's so many different ways it could go?
Yeah, so when COVID happened, I started a job working for this company called Soundstripe that's like a stock music company, and essentially I was writing and recording 5 songs a month, and I did that for 18 months, I think, straight, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but actually it was between 5 and 7. It was like at one point I was doing 7 songs a month, just from nothing to finished in 1 month. And like, for sure, just about anyone could write and record 5 songs in a month. It's not that hard, but to do it consistently month after month after month after month with no breaks. Like as soon as that month turns over, all right, I got to write 5 songs, ready, set, go. And it was like it was really like a songwriting boot camp, honestly. I've gotten better about not writing an entire song and then having to freaking somehow come up with lyrics for the whole thing. I think I've gotten better at like writing as I go and forcing myself to get the lyrics done as I'm writing the song. But up until 2020, that's what I did. I would have music and I would be struggling to fit lyrics into it.
Did you use like any tricks or tools pre-pandemic, like to get those lyrics like where they need to be and where they are?
A lot of good things happen when you get into like a flow state. I don't know if you know much about that, but
yeah,
like when you're just kind of halfway in a project, or you've only been working on something for an hour or two, you're not working at maximum capacity. I find that like if I'm writing, I'll usually hit a flow state after about 4 hours, where I can like really start, like I'll beat my head against the wall for 3.5 hours, and then suddenly like around the 4 hour mark, like the verses will just boom, 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 and I'll like knock them out. Be like, why was this so hard? But it takes a little patience and focus, and you have to have the time to spend. You have to invest the time. Say, all right, I'm going to block off this much time, and I'm not going to walk away from here until the song is done.
Yeah.
And you have to actually do it. But of course, there's tools, rhymezone.com for just getting new words going through your brain. Is help.
Yeah.
Yeah, just pull another spark out of somewhere, right? I was thinking like this is like a very like bright, like Oblique Strategies, or Dan the singer from Semisonic, I think just released like a deck of like creative strategy kind of songwriting, like, brief type things that are just like, they're not the whole thing. They're not like a shorthand to just here's your song now, but gets you unstuck and can sometimes help you get back into that flow state that you're talking about. And I'm a huge proponent of that. And when it comes to like time batching, and if you actually want to make better songs, you got to write a bunch of bad ones. And how do you do that? Like, you get in the trenches and you finish those bad ones. It's very, very difficult and very rare, I find. But I think probably what, it sounds like you find as well, is that you can write some really like meaningful, prolific stuff with the depth that you're looking for in like 20-minute batches between like work and like here's my workout. Let me pick up a guitar, 10 minutes. You can chip away at some stuff, but I think you're totally right. And everybody hits that flow state a little differently, but it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh shit, I've been playing to this loop for like 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, but you really got somewhere. Yeah. And so I completely resonate with that. And I think that's some really sound advice. Especially too, where it's like, that's kind of what it takes. You know what I mean? Yeah. You gotta block it out to be willing to sit there with an idea and do the like bang your head against the wall. Cause that's really just kind of like the warm up period for an exercise, right? It's kind of like I remember I was a very overweight kid in junior high and high school, and we'd like run the mile, right? And we're like, the coach gets you out there on the track. It's mile day. I'm terrified. And you start like, okay, warm up, just jog around the track or whatever. And then, do that. And then I'm like, I get to the end of it and he's like, all right, come on in. And I was just like, he's like, all right, that's, like, now let's go for like a warm up, like jumping jacks in place. I was like, that wasn't even the warm up. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, I'm dying out here and you want me to actually try to run a mile in less than 9 minutes? Fuck that. And, but it's interesting, it's like in that parallel is kind of like what you realize is like, oh, okay, well, it was literally just the action of trying to just focus myself and get all the way inside the idea before I could actually start making headway. But that's great, man, dude.
Totally.
This has been such an incredible treat, Aaron. I really appreciate it. The record truly is, there's a reason why, I caught this, and some of our friends, with the represses and special editions, but so there's a lot of those out there. So I'm sure, there's way too many to point to, but specifically, with all things for you and Copeland related these days and in the future, where can people go to check out everything new and or find, maybe, start the search for a new pressing, anniversary pressing of, one of these records?
Oh, well, we did. Yeah, we have a 20th anniversary pressing of Beneath Medicine Tree on Smart Punk.
I've got it upstairs, actually. Matt sent me, full disclosure, Matt sent me one, and it was a surprise, and I was very elated. So he didn't even know that this was happening yet. Yeah, that was great.
He's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's done. We did a tour, and we did which is already, it's already happened, but played the record. I did 25 shows or something, and it went great. I'm very much like the typical artist where I'm not super keen on playing the old stuff. I would rather like be making new records and playing newer music, but it actually ended up being really fun, and I felt very connected with the audiences. We had a lot of people come out, and of course, like the same way I am with like Recovering the Satellites, the Counting Crows record. Like, people were telling me, how much the music meant to them, and yeah, it was awesome. We had a great time, and now I'm kind of anxious to make new music.
Make new music, yeah. What's happening in that department right now? Is there anything that Copeland fans or fans of your other projects can look forward to? Yeah,
we've got a bunch of songs written, kind of planning the next steps right now. And we're still writing, but yeah, I have a bunch written, so I'm ready to do something. Kind of itching to get started.
Well, we look forward to it. What's where can people head online, like website wise, or to follow along and catch up?
Copeland.band now. Our website isn't much, but we're on Instagram and Copeland Band on Instagram. I got locked out of my Twitter, so I don't have a Twitter anymore. Ridiculous.
So if you're following somebody, that it's not him.
Aaron Marsh music isn't me anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's okay. We'll point to all that stuff, in the notes here as always, but once again, I think I can speak for Tom and probably a lot of people listening to this right now. We look forward to hearing some of those new songs too.
Thanks so much, man.
But yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
So Aaron brought up an idea in this interview that I think perfectly encapsulates what we were trying to say with season 5. The idea that when you release your first album, it's your entire discography. It's your entire world. It's everything the world knows about you and everything they think you have to say. And that can create a lot of pressure for an artist. We often try to pack too much into our first pieces, like even Aaron mentioned doing with the elaborate vocal harmonies on Beneath Medicine Tree. Or maybe that internal perfectionist in you gets a hold of the work and you end up over-editing and over-sterilizing everything that was real and raw about it. And that's no surprise. We are our own harshest critic, mostly because we as creators have the most nuanced ammunition to offer our insecurities when they're aiming to cut us down. But as our body of work grows, we learn to face down the challenges of releasing music and submitting it to public scrutiny. As our creative world expands, we begin to disarm those external and internal critics. We begin to be less afraid of what they will say, and thus less preoccupied by their expectations. And just like the creative process itself, the evolution of this confidence is not always a well-balanced linear path. But it's a path that I believe tends to bend toward more meaningful work over time. And the fact that you've spent time with us across this season is not lost on us for a second. So thank you for choosing to be a part of our journey right here on The Record Process.